Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in. I am Katie Batesman, the Content Director at SheCanCode, and today we're discussing career transitions within the tech marketing sector. The great thing about the tech sector is that it offers something for everyone, whether you're technical or non-technical. Today we're talking all things tech marketing and how to make the transition into the industry with the fabulous Jessica Jacobs, Global Director of Partnerships and Growth at Incubeta. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you so much for joining us. Yes. Can you kick off with a little bit of background about yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Jessica. I'm originally from South Africa, now in the Netherlands, all because of my career in tech marketing. So I think it's great that we're actually touching on the topic of transitioning into tech marketing. I started my career as a developer. For about 4.5 years, I was pretty much stuck into the coding side of everything. And it was kind of through that journey that I've transitioned into the marketing side. And it is because of my technical background that I'm able to actually speak tech marketing today.
Amazing. So I didn't know what you were going to say. I didn't know whether you were going to say I didn't have a technical background and that's why tech marketing appealed to me. But it was actually one of the first questions I did think was, did you have a technical background? And it was something that you had seen maybe from, a company that you'd worked in and you thought actually that would be a good career direction for me. I suppose you have to at least know how to, as you said, talk techie, I suppose would be the correct term there, because it's not just, even though it can be a non-technical role, I suppose you have to understand how to talk about a product, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I kind of stumbled on it. Now I can definitely say I kind of speak tech because I've had this tech background, but initially I actually started my career studying business management, which I would say is more kind of like the traditional, what women would do is kind of go for the behind the desk, more paper-driven roles. And I was actually busy doing my practical side of my studies. And I ended up working at a university that had actually offered a lot of courses around the Microsoft ecosystem and the Java ecosystem, and it all just happened to be development. And I was actually surrounded by a lot of these instructors that were men, and they were all doing these tech courses. And it was very clear that there was a foundation that was created for men to kind of thrive in. And I don't think it was explicitly said. It just so kind of happened that that's the direction we went into. And I remember the kind of head of this institution came to me and he was like, wouldn't you be interested in trying this out? And I thought, well, absolutely. Why not give it a go? And before I knew it, I was into it for about 4.5 years, and I was only doing a lot of technical stuff, and it was all development. And at the same time, I was doing these instructor-led courses, teaching other people how to develop. I was also building and working on the in-house tools we were using. Later on, I decided that I didn't really want to stay in education. And I kind of bridged over to the marketing side, which again was a stumble. I bridged into a development role where I was one of the developers working on a crowdsourcing platform that was built into Facebook. So immediately my bridge was I was a developer building tech for Facebook. But at the same time, I started getting exposure to the Facebook ecosystem, which was essentially just ahead of the curve before marketing was what it was today, or digital marketing, I would say. And that's how my pieces came together. So it was definitely kind of stumbling on it, but I love it. And I'm still here kind of 12 years in.
Amazing. And the fact that you said that you were in teaching other people how to, learn the things that you were building, that must have really, helped your skills in terms of, instead of just building things and that's it, you had to communicate about, what they do and how other people can learn to use them. So, I mean, you probably didn't realize at the time that was just going to, feed into your future marketing career, and all of those skills kind of, as you said, all came together for good, which is the great thing about the tech industry, isn't it? It's just so flexible on what you can do and where you can go.
Yeah, absolutely. You frame it so nicely. I mean, at the time, I definitely didn't realize it, but that is definitely the foundation of the strategic side of what I'm able to do today. Today, I am able to take really complex situations, specifically for large organizations, where they are stuck, and I'm able to actually translate those complexities into solutions. And it's because I've had to take it from the approach of really kind of diving into the what is this? How do you use this? Where does it become beneficial? That today I'm kind of transferring these skills in building more strategic roadmaps for the future of marketing.
Yes, absolutely. And in terms of skills, what skills and qualifications do you think are important for a career in tech marketing? If any of our listeners are considering that move, what would you say?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I would say there were very little needed to kind of get started. But the truth today is that it accelerates so quickly. And I would say definitely really depends which side you would want to sit on. The skills you would need to be able to have certain level of conversations with clients, if you're sitting more on the relational side of it, simple, know how to kind of dive into complex situations and break it down into more understandable ones. And now we're just talking about communication skills. But the more technical ones definitely requires you to have a little bit of a technical understanding. So things like SQL, definitely, I would say, is a great starting point. Being able to kind of dive into data is an important factor where we are becoming more data-led. So your understanding of data is definitely a good starting point.
Yes, yeah, I think people tend to think, don't they, of soft skills and things like that. I mean, I was going to ask you about useful transferable skills, for people coming into the industry. And I suppose we do think of things like soft skills and communication and being organized and those types of things. But as you said there, it would be absolutely useful for somebody to have those few technical skills under their belt, just so they really understand how something works, so they can really communicate about a particular product or whatever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's the opportunity to kind of go knee deep into solutions and being able to solve them, and for that you do require some level of technical understanding and skills. But I would say the ones that are easily overlooked are those individuals that do focus on soft skills, but not in the traditional way. Yes, of course, soft skills from a communication perspective is important, and how to write an email. Those things are really important. But what I've learned is if you want to be a standout, the one thing you definitely need to know how to do is avoid the tech jargon. Nobody understands that. That is a transferable skill that if you're able to take that tech jargon and make it seem super simple, I would say that's the transferable skill. That's the standout.
Yes, I love that. How many of us have been stuck in that meeting with the tech jargon and the acronyms, and everybody's just kind of looking at each other very puzzled? And you're absolutely right. I think by the time a product reaches marketing and PR and comms, it just, from my side, I receive a lot of press releases where you see them and you're like, I have absolutely no idea what is happening in here. I just need somebody to say it, nice and simple and clear. But you're right. I think it's easy to get lost in that world, isn't it? Of just tech jargon, which doesn't help anybody. And I suppose, as we were saying, it is helpful to have that technical knowledge working in tech marketing, because I suppose you would cut through that, wouldn't you? You would cut through the jargon if you understood more of the technical side of something, instead of just relying on a couple of buzzwords to throw in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think we're all kind of guilty of having created this tech jargon, and we can't help it, right? It's the way that we kind of attach our success to it, because we're showcasing to the world that we understand the topic really well by being able to reference elements of our knowledge. However, I think what has really happened in the last couple of years, we've seen that transformation must happen fast. However, it's not happening fast. And that's because these decision makers just don't understand what we're saying. And you're right, a lot of these articles today allude to some of the most technical topics to date. And we're expecting decision makers to be able to understand them. So that is definitely something I think that more and more we'll find people kind of simplifying it and trying to kind of break through some of those technical topics. And that's something that I've been focused on the last couple of years, is really trying to kind of break down that tech jargon. Just don't bring it to the forefront of the table. The work is still good, but you don't have to reference the technical elements.
Yes, doesn't help anybody. And it's amazing as well when that happens, especially in person, in an in-person meeting, and nobody really wants to say that perhaps they don't understand something, but everybody's thinking the same thing. I have no idea what you're talking about. And I think people working from home or working remotely, that can be harder sometimes to be able to communicate what you actually want to get across in a meeting. So there is a stereotype. Well, I mean, there's a stereotype about the tech industry in general. We have quite a PR problem in the industry, but there is a stereotype that tech marketing can be a bit boring. Do you agree with that? And also, what makes it an interesting area to work, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's quite boring for people who don't really understand what goes into it. And quite often it's not that we're never building case studies that speaks to the technicality of it. Everybody wants to see the beautiful creative side, and that's fine. I think the stereotype is slightly changing, especially because we have to become more tech focused. The world is becoming more tech focused, and therefore over time, I think the stereotype will change. For me personally, what has made it so exciting is the fact that we've been able to use technology to drive so much change in things that we used to traditionally do very labored. And that's an exciting thing for me to see. And everybody is now starting to speak about it, because consumers are also using a lot more of the technologies that we in marketing have to use. They're also smarter. So they also appreciate and also demand a lot more from us. So now all of a sudden it's not boring. In fact, if you are not technically driven in your marketing activities, you're seen as quite old school. You're now falling behind. Now nobody is interested in what you have to offer. So it's a slow change, but it's definitely happening.
I suppose as well, working in the industry, from what I've seen and the people, if I've been away to a conference or an exhibition, I find that a lot of the people that I've been hanging out with that work in marketing, there's that kind of hidden secret that people don't realize how much you'll get to travel in marketing, and all of the really exciting things that happen on that side of the fence. That's kind of just something that people don't hear about, do they? Has that been your experience as well, of you get to go to lots of places because you have to get out there and meet people and communicate about what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would have definitely been one of those that a couple of years ago would have thought that traveling is not really in the marketing job description. But it's completely incorrect. It is 100% there. There is such a big community out there across so many different topics that you either have the opportunity to kind of partner up with these external event organizers, and you get to go on stage and share what you're doing. And the beauty of it is you're sharing it with some of the biggest brands in the world. Then on top of that, you're sharing it with the consumers that engage with those brands. So you definitely have a foot on both sides, I would say, of the ecosystem. And it's as a result of that you get to kind of travel the world and you get to share all of these things. And of course, now with these hybrid events, you even have more exposure, because you could be doing an event at your home, but you're doing it to a whole different continent, which I think is what the marketing industry offers.
Yes. And I think as well that stereotype of the industry maybe being, I don't want to say boring, maybe a little dry is probably the stereotype. But when I moved from, I temporarily moved from journalism to an advertising agency, and actually I found it so creative, and it's just storytelling. I mean, we tell stories in the news, and that's absolutely fine. But when I found myself working for brands and having to tell their stories, I mean, suddenly I just had to get incredibly creative, and it really stretched me as a person. But I think that's something that you probably don't realize until you're in an environment like that, and suddenly you think, actually, why would somebody think that this industry is boring? Because it's just storytelling, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think our idea of marketing is still pretty one-dimensional, and the reason why it is still one-dimensional is because universities are only now starting to adopt digital marketing courses that kind of exposes the world to this whole new world of what marketing actually means. And you're 100% right. I think what I've definitely learned is that we originally kind of tied creativity to an actual output of a creative asset. That is how one-dimensional we were. But now what makes it so interesting is how we get to actually transform what those creatives look like. We're using technology to inform it. And we're diving into customer segmentations. How do you speak to, how do you design content for a specific customer? And that to me is definitely one of the most interesting things about marketing, is because we're defining the story, but at a much larger scale.
Yes. Yes, I love that. Yes, you're defining the story. I love that. Can we talk about projects? What's been the most interesting project you've worked on?
Okay, so there's definitely been a few, but if I have to take my standout ones where I really kind of saw the power of the tech side kind of bridged with the marketing side, there's two different cases. From an internal organizational perspective, one of the most exciting ones I've definitely kind of endeavored was working with some of the largest brands in the world, like a L'Oreal in this case, which we know owns so many sub-brands and have just covering so many different countries, and their staff complement is so big. And we needed to kind of come up with a solution that helps them see how their ecosystem for marketing tech is actually connected. And why this was interesting to me is we don't realize how complex these organizations are, how difficult it is to actually ask them to get this overview in place. But I enjoy those level of challenges. So from an internal perspective, I would say that it's great to see how tech marketing is a corporate enabler as well. But from an external perspective, one of the ones I've done a couple of years ago actually was in the financial sector. Now, nobody wants to talk, finances and funeral policies, but we found a really interesting way to bring funeral policies to consumers in a very engaging format. And we actually used WhatsApp at the time, WhatsApp for Business, and we integrated WhatsApp for Business into an automated series, which actually became the first series that launched on a tech channel such as WhatsApp, where we were essentially had real cast members populate their different lines, and they would speak to each other about what was going on in their life and how to actually how to handle something like planning for a funeral. And we just got so much exposure through it because we've got consumers that signed up to actually watch this WhatsApp series, which was free. And the entire idea was we were using a tech channel to help educate consumers on how to plan, how to use funeral cover. What should you be doing if something happens to one of your family members? So we took a really boring topic, which is also quite a sad topic, but we turned it into something inspirational and something that they can actually educate and learn from.
And something that people probably, one, don't want to talk about, but also just kind of put off, until it's upon you. And it's something that, people just don't think of every day. So actually, it sounds really interesting, actually, because probably people don't know a lot about the topic. So yeah, actually, that would have been a really good one to think of, to put on, even if whoever suggested that you would have looked at and thought, well, that's a bit of a why would we want to go down that route?
Exactly. But how do you how do you educate the youth, right? You have to educate the youth in the channels that they are in. And it's just not so traditional like it was a couple of years ago. So it is important for us to really start kind of thinking outside of the box. And these were one of those moments. And this is why I kind of feel like tech marketing is definitely going to be at the forefront of how we can educate the youth moving forward. And this was just one of those cases that I just love to work on. It was fantastic to kind of see it unfold.
Yeah. And you mentioned there that you worked for L'Oreal. You've worked big companies, smaller companies. For our listeners, if you're transitioning, do you think it would be better to start to be, baptism of fire and start a bigger company or a smaller company? I suppose there's challenges that come with both, really, isn't there?
Definitely. I mean, actually, to me, it's not really about the size of the company that you're working on. I think for me, the one piece of advice I would give to someone that's going to transition into this industry is really start with a topic and get to know that topic really well. The beauty of this industry is you can expand, you can enhance what you know over time. But it's quite often the mistake is we fall into this broad specialism. So somebody comes in and they go, I know a lot about a lot of things, but I don't know the depth of it. And that's where you'll get lost. It is important to kind of start getting to know the depth about one thing and then building on top of that. And then you won't struggle in any size organization then.
Yes, because I think some people, when they they're starting in a new career, a new career area, or even when it's their first job, they always think, I'll go for the big company, it's nice and safe, I'll get lots of opportunities. And I think sometimes a lot of smaller companies get overlooked because people might see them as a bit of a risk, or there might not be as many opportunities. But it's lovely that actually you just said just focus on a speciality and build it out from there. Do you have any advice for our listeners on that note? Those that are thinking about starting a career in tech marketing?
Yeah. So my advice would be tech marketing can be quite broad. Really decide which side you want to kind of sit in and kind of hold on to that first side firstly, right? So on the tech side of things, it would require you to kind of dive into more technical topics. What do you want to do? Be open and honest with yourself versus just saying, I want to go into tech marketing. Because you'll get lost. You'll get lost on where you're kind of building your specialism in. On the marketing side of things, it can be more so what was known as the more media activation side, and get to know what are those skills that you need in order to thrive in those environments. We're seeing a lot of specialists in the industry, but we are definitely struggling to find specialists that have got a deep-rooted understanding of everything end to end.
Yes, and being a specialist in that, would it be worth any of our listeners looking into, training, even if they're not going to be the developer building something? Would it be worth, even just looking into those courses and kind of getting kind of a high level understanding of how things work? Even if you don't need that qualification to actually go into that job and build that product, would it be worth doing some online courses perhaps, just to kind of familiarize yourself with what these products, how they work?
Definitely. I that's probably one of the things I would put quite a big focus on. If you're not going to go into the development side of it, make sure you have a really good understanding of what it means. Because if we don't, we often won't be able to actually facilitate the conversations that we need to be able to facilitate, simply because we don't understand the foundational requirements. One thing to also kind of call out is I kind of see this happen quite a lot. We get a lot of these interns kind of joining the business, and they have the CV that says, I've worked in all of these different languages, and all of those development languages are just not adaptable today. We really have to kind of focus on which are the ones that are most often used. And I would say, if we're going to go into the tech industry, look at some of those APIs. Look at some of the Google APIs. What do they predominantly, or what are the languages they are predominantly available in? Focus on some of those foundational elements of those languages, and you will already be far ahead of most of the people in the industry.
Yes, absolutely. And it sounds like, the tech industry in general, it seems to be full of people that have that mindset of continuous learning. As you said, it's very fast paced. Things change incredibly fast in the industry. I'm assuming that you have to still have that mindset in tech marketing. When I used to work with a lot of PRs, for example, on that side of the fence, I was always amazed as to how many details they knew about particular products. And the same in marketing, like there are so many details that, I would ask a question about a particular story and that person would just know it off the top of their head. And I used to look and think, how do you know those details about that product, and how do you keep up to date on that? But it was just a mindset that those people had. I could skim the surface of a product with a short story on what it was and what a new feature might be, but they lived and breathed that area. Is that something you'd agree with, that it takes a certain person, doesn't it, to feel like they want to continue to learn all the time?
Yes, spot on. If you kind of go into this industry, the baggage is you have to continue learning. If you don't, if you kind of fall behind, there's actually really devastating consequences to that. One, you will not be able to work on the most progressive accounts we see in the world. You will not be able to be at the forefront of this industry simply just because you do not house the knowledge that is needed. So the requirement is definitely, you have to be a self-starter. You have to tell yourself, these are the type of websites I'm always going to keep my eye on. And these are the type of courses I have to redo every year, because that's the other downfall. Our courses expire on a yearly basis, which means we have to be kept on our toes on a yearly basis in order to stay on top of what we are doing.
Yes, exactly. It's not just okay, I've done my piece for the year and that's it. Yeah, it's as you said, you would quickly fall behind in an industry, which I suppose it would be okay if you're happy to stay where you are and you know, work at a company maybe that isn't moving forward, but that's no fun for anybody. As you said, it's you know, you want to be working on those progressive technologies and to continually be moving forward. We know the tech industry has a shortage of women, but what more do you think can be done to encourage female talent through the pipeline?
Yeah, I think that I would love to see a lot more opportunities for women to kind of speak about the topics. And I don't think that it's being consciously done. I mean, it's unfortunately still the case where there are just more men in the industry. And what we can definitely promote is, when we are doing events, let's first find some of those female speakers that can back themselves up to be able to talk at an event. And I think it's also our job to be able to say to women, look, I get we're busy, but this event is also a focus for you. And one of the things I've definitely seen is that there are amazing women out there in the industry, but quite often when it comes to exposure and doing events, it's one of the things that they kind of park and they go, well, I'm too busy with all of my work and I don't want to drop the balls here. So this kind of takes a backseat. And I feel like men almost have the opposite effect. They kind of balance it differently. They'll go to the forefront first and they'll go, I'll pick up these balls in a bit. And I think we need to kind of educate women to find that delicate balance. Do the events. You won't drop the balls. That's what we're really good at. We can manage quite a lot of things. And we just need to create the awareness and kind of push women to stand up, be more assertive, and say yes to those events.
Yes, I find in the tech sector in particular, there are always events as well that they, after the event, when they've had, you know, a male-dominated panel, and somebody's picked up on that on Twitter and said, you know, where's, you know, there's your diversity within this event. And normally the conference will bite back and say, oh, you know, we couldn't find female speakers, and then obviously an argument will start. There are so many great female speakers within the industry. I think it's just looking for them and making sure that that event really makes a conscious effort to make sure that they have a balance of speakers, because as you said, you know, there are great speakers out there, great female speakers, but also women might not always put themselves forward. So, you know, just an event making sure that they make the effort to reach out to ladies and say, you know, can you put aside some time to come and speak at our event, instead of just, you know, taking whoever comes along and they happen to be another all-male panel. Is so important.
Yeah, one of the things, one of the things that we also picked up on was we still have these traditional titles that we invite to these events, and that's all right. What we should just be a little bit more aware of is that these amazing women are often also hiding behind different titles. So we should probably look at expanding who we are inviting to these C panel events, because quite often it's not the CEOs that would hold the knowledge. Sometimes it is different titles in the organization. It's only because our organization, our industry is so different. Our titles do not necessarily follow the norm of big corporate structures. And I think that's probably what needs to be unearthed and rediscovered.
Yes, I completely agree with you there, especially if you're at a company that has all of those strange job titles. I've worked at an American company. I find they throw in lots of job titles and kind of make them up on the spot. And you're absolutely right. I don't think event organizers in particular would realize that there is, you know, somebody that they really should have on their panel just because they've got a very strange job title, you know, or something was just kind of made up as they've moved through the ranks. I just wanted to ask you a bit about when you worked in a male-dominated environment. You said that obviously, and a lot of companies, you found that it wasn't done on purpose. It was just the way that it came together, and the men that you were training with, it just happened to be a male-dominated environment. Did you find any challenges there, or did you find, you know, actually that you were still managed to progress in that environment anyway. But you know, did you find any challenges that? Is there anything that you wish you had been told before you got into that type of environment?
Oh, definitely. There were so many things I wish I've been told, because I probably would have handled it so differently as well. I think one of the things I've realized or come to realize is that sometimes when I walk into a room, or when you walk into a room, when you're in this kind of space, they do expect you to look different. And there is still essentially not just a stereotype of it being like more male driven. There's also a stereotype in what you need to look like when you're in this tech space. So immediately I kind of, I walked in, and some of the challenges I definitely got exposed to was the fact that, is this just another pretty face? Or are they essentially just washing the title to make it look like you've got female representation? And that's really tough to kind of break through that stereotype. And immediately when I kind of always found myself having to be on the back foot and say, but I do come with these credentials. And you kind of have to accept that that's really something that you're going to have to take on board and be diplomatic about it and keep pushing yourself forward, and don't let that get you under. It's something that will take a couple of years to change, and we're still in this journey. There was one unfortunate case where when I was still an instructor, and they had asked for an instructor to come over to train a corporate business and train all of their developers specifically in Java. And I was the Java instructor, and I had to go. And then when they had put my CV forward to say, this is the instructor that will come, they declined it. They straight up responded to say that they do not want a female trainer.
My
and
gosh.
I was devastated. And I was so young at the time. And I definitely realized that those are the setbacks that you should just not even take on board. Over time, it will become normal for us to kind of be in this space.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I can't believe somebody would declare. And you know what, I hear it so often as well from ladies that say to us, I feel like I have to prove myself so much more than my male colleagues sometimes. And you're right, it's that thought of, you know, is it just a pretty face that's come through the door, and I have to prove that actually I'm as good as you, or probably better than you at some of these things. Yeah, we hear that often, sadly enough. And it's nice to hear you share that advice of, you know, you just need to ignore that and move forward, because it could really knock somebody's confidence, couldn't it? And just think, actually, this really isn't for me.
Yep. They're always going to kind of say to you that this is going to go over your head, and they're going to expect you to kind of feel broken down by it. And immediately you're going to want to react. And one of the things I've definitely learned is you will be labeled as difficult. You will be labeled as not likable, and you will also be labeled as emotional. And that's actually fine. Live with it, and do not let that stop you from being assertive and kind of speaking up and sharing your knowledge and having a voice at the table. It's part of the cycle. And eventually you break through that cycle and you earn people's trust and credibility, and that will be behind you. As long as we all accept that, unfortunately, it's part of our journey. It will be there.
Yes. Well, that is lovely advice to end it on, because we're already out of time, Jessica. But thank you so much for coming in and chatting with us this morning. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And to everybody listening, as always, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again next time.